recent days, the world has witnessed a bold and unexpected diplomatic move from U.S. President Donald Trump. In a series of statements to the press on March 31st, Trump issued stern warnings to both Russia and Ukraine. Specifically, Moscow was given an ultimatum: impose unprecedented punitive tariffs ranging from 25% to 50% on all Russian oil and gas exports unless President Vladimir Putin swiftly comes to the negotiating table to seek a peace agreement to end the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Trump pointed out the imminent consequences. Any country continuing to buy energy from Russia would face the risk of having all business activities blocked in the U.S. market. Not only Russia, but also Ukraine came under the U.S. leader's scrutiny. President Volodymyr Zelensky received a warning not to withdraw from the agreement to supply rare earth minerals to the United States. Trump subtly implied that this was part of a debt repayment for the massive aid Washington had provided Kyiv earlier, stressing that serious trouble would follow if Ukraine withdrew from this agreement or tried to tie it to any other conditions, such as joining the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. This decisive move comes amid Trump publicly expressing his anger over Putin's doubts about the legitimacy of his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump regarded this as a serious sabotage of the peace process he is working to expedite. Trump even threatened to impose oil tariffs on Russia if no peace agreement was reached. It is clear that the former U.S. president is deploying a multifaceted strategy, using both the economic stick and political leverage to achieve his goals. Could this merely be a diplomatic facade? What is the true nature of Trump's actions? At first glance, Trump's actions might appear to be an attempt to push for peace, a goal that the international community desires. But is there something more behind this appearance? A deeper look into the situation reveals that this is a complex strategic move with multiple objectives for the Trump administration. First, it is about restoring bargaining power. Trump is making full use of economic tools, particularly the threat of tariffs, as a strong weapon to force Russia to come to the negotiating table under terms deemed more favorable by Washington. The minimal goal could be to end the conflict in a way that Trump can proudly claim as a diplomatic victory. Second, it aims to reshape the dynamics between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. By simultaneously pressuring both Moscow and Kyiv, Trump is trying to reposition the U.S. as the key architect or even disruptor of the final agreement. This could be an attempt to reduce the influence of other regional actors, such as the European Union, EU, or NATO, organizations that the Trump administration had previously viewed negatively. Third, it is about safeguarding the U.S.'s strategic economic interests. The stern warning to Ukraine about the rare earth mineral agreement clearly shows a dual objective for Washington: securing an essential resource supply for the U.S. economy and defense industry. This aims to separate these resources from any political conditions Ukraine might impose, such as NATO membership. The U.S. heavily depends on rare earth imports, with China being the primary supplier. Ukraine holds significant reserves of these minerals, making it a potential key partner for diversifying America's supply chains. The current agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine establishes a joint investment fund, with Ukraine contributing 50% of future revenues from the exploitation of state-owned resources. Fourth, it sends a domestic message. Trump's tough stance on Russia and debt collection from Ukraine aligns perfectly with his image as a decisive leader who always puts America first, a narrative he has built throughout his political career. This move could serve to strengthen support from domestic voters, particularly those who favor his hardline stance and economic nationalism. Potential beneficiaries of this move include the Trump administration. If the strategy succeeds, U.S. industries in need of a stable supply of rare earths, and all parties hoping for a swift end to the conflict in Ukraine, regardless of the specific terms of a peace agreement. On the other hand, directly affected parties may include the Russian economy, Ukraine's sovereignty and strategic autonomy, the global energy market, and America's European allies, who may be concerned about Washington's changing approach. Historically, the U.S. has frequently used economic weapons to achieve its political objectives. Economic sanctions have been imposed on countries like Iran, Cuba, North Korea, and Russia in the past. However, The effectiveness of these measures is often uncertain, dependent on international consensus and the target country's ability to cope. The imposition of secondary sanctions, as Trump is threatening, is a more powerful tool but also highly controversial and carries risks for the U.S. itself. Additionally, personal summit diplomacy between top leaders has historically led to breakthroughs, such as the meetings between Reagan and Gorbachev or Nixon and Mao. However, this approach also carries risks, especially when it relies too heavily on personal relationships and overlooks established institutional structures. Finally, pressuring U.S. allies is not new. A classic example is the 1956 Suez Crisis, when the U.S. used economic pressure to force Britain and France to withdraw from Egypt. While this may be effective in the short term, it often damages trust and long-term alliance relations. Trump's bold diplomatic move could have widespread and multidimensional effects in several areas. First, on the global economy. Energy prices could fluctuate sharply, raising inflation risks and slowing global economic growth. European countries dependent on Russian energy supplies could face significant difficulties. Second, on geopolitics. Relations between major powers, particularly U.S.-Russia, U.S.-EU, and Russia-China relationships, could become more tense and unpredictable. The role of international organizations like the United Nations could be weakened if major powers prioritize unilateral actions. Third, on regional security. The risk of conflict escalation in Ukraine remains, and neighboring countries may feel more uneasy given the unpredictable developments. Fourth, on domestic politics in various countries. Trump's decisions could spark controversies and deep divisions within the U.S. as well as in the countries involved, particularly regarding the approach to Ukraine and relations with Russia. Long term, the big question is whether this move will lead to a new world order or if it is just a transient development in the ongoing power struggle between great powers. Trump's diplomatic move toward Russia and Ukraine is a high-stakes gamble, containing both opportunities and risks. The simultaneous use of economic and political pressure shows a strong resolve to achieve his set goals. However, the complexity of the current geopolitical situation, the differences in interests between the parties involved, and the unpredictable factors on the battlefield in Ukraine could present numerous challenges to this strategy. Will this move bring about the desired results? The imposition of secondary sanctions on Russia could lead to serious economic consequences, but its actual effectiveness will depend on the cooperation of other major powers and Moscow's ability to adapt. Meanwhile, pressuring Ukraine to secure rare earth mineral supplies for the U.S. could bring strategic economic benefits to Washington, but it also risks undermining Kyiv's sovereignty and foreign policy choices. In this context, the reactions of other major powers such as the EU and China will play a crucial role in shaping the outcome. The EU, with its dependence on Russian energy and deep concerns about regional security, may seek to protect its interests and maintain a unified approach toward Russia. China, with its increasingly close relationship with Moscow, may seize the opportunity to strengthen its position and promote a peace solution on its own terms. In conclusion, Trump's diplomatic move has heightened instability and unpredictability in an already volatile world. Is this a brilliant move that will bring peace and benefits to the U.S., or will it lead to unintended consequences and exacerbate global conflicts? The answer remains to be seen.